Always the latest news and views. You're listening to the Montreal Now podcast with Aaron Rand.
It is time for us to check in with Chris Dimakos, our CJAD 800 legal contributor. And Chris, interesting take this week that you want to discuss. I would have never even thought that this could be something that could come up because it involves, in this particular case, you're going to describe this, private messages between employees of a company. Keyword, private messages. And what happened as a result of them having been found out. So set up this story if you don't mind.
Yeah, so you have a group of employees that have this app on their phone. It's the WhatsApp that is not a company platform at all. It's a private one. And these employees, these 5 employees, are not at work. They're outside socializing, and they exchange messages on this private app. And in those messages, amongst other things, they discuss some of the female employees at the company. So what happens is no complaint is filed, but the employer and the HR personnel get wind of the fact that there's a group of employees who made comments about some of the female employees off work premises on a private app. Nothing being used in terms of technology at workplace. Mm-hmm. And what the employer did was say, "Hey, we're gonna investigate this," and they did. And obviously, there was legal posturing about privacy and about the fact that they're intruding on someone's private messages made through their private app. But in the end, this went to court, and the court ruled that it was reversed and different stages. But ultimately, the last court that heard this decided that once you are talking to coworkers and you are talking about coworkers, then it becomes an employment issue, and the employer has jurisdiction to investigate. And that is a major development in. With all this technology and what your expectation of privacy can be when you are discussing employees and you're talking to other employees. So just because you're on your own app doesn't necessarily mean that has to be excluded from what the employer can see as damaging to the employer's reputation.
Wow.
And getting intervened. So it's very important that people understand this. So when you sign on to get a job with someone, there are many privacy rights that you have that you are going to relinquish because you are an employee and you earn a salary from that company.
Okay. I mean, as you describe this, my first reaction is this is a little Big Brother-ish, right? First of all, these guys are sitting around and talking about, women in the office, which is something, typically men or women might be doing, talking about other people. They're on what they consider to be, their own private network. How would this even get found out? Like, how did this eventually surface?
Right. That's a great question. So obviously someone amongst the group was mentioning it to someone else, and then they got wind of it. And, you raised a good point there. And you're like, well, it's a couple of people that are speaking at work. At what point does the employer not have the right to get involved with your conversation? And the court looked at that and said, and the lawyers for the employees was saying, hey, this is Big Brother type. I mean, they're not using company email here. They're not using company platforms. They decided to use their own private app. But what the court ultimately decided was, had this been a conversation between an employee and other people that are not part of the work, of the employment group, well, then that's fine. But because they were just employees were discussing amongst themselves, other employees at the workplace, and it got out, that right there makes it an employment issue. So, it's hard for people to understand this, but what you have to be careful is if you are talking to colleagues at work about colleagues at work, well, then the employer has an interest in that, because let's just say there's something that was really damaging there about somebody talking about a coworker at an employee, and they found out. Well, then let's just say that female employee had grounds to file a complaint and say, look, these guys are talking really badly about me and they're making some really derogatory comments about me. You, the employer, has to police that. So that's where the court went to and said, had the female employee filed a complaint, would this be an employment issue? co-workers talking to co-workers about her, yes, it was off work premises. And yes, it was with a private app, but it's still co-workers talking about co-workers. And that was enough for them to get involved as an employer and investigate. And the court gave them reason. So, there's so many people that gossip about work, and it happens all the time. But you have to be conscious of the fact, if you're gossiping about work to other co-workers and it gets out, you can be in trouble. You can actually be terminated with cause, which would deprive you of your severance. So it's an important judgment for many, especially with all this technology we're seeing with Snapchat and WhatsApp and all these different platforms that are so immediate. And you sometimes forget, even if they're not permanent and you erase it, if somebody knows you sent it, well, then it can come back to haunt you.
Wow. In this particular case, so this is 5 employees, right, who created this WhatsApp group. Were they all 5 terminated?
Yes, all 5. And the reason being is because the employer had to set the framework and said, had this happened in the offices, it's no different than had it happened with all 5 of them, at a bar, exchanging messages about what a female employee looks like. So they took away the fact that it happened on the phone. It wasn't intended for anyone to find out. Well, they did. They did find out, and the damage was done.
So is the thinking, you've mentioned this in the past, right, about this idea when you sign on with an employer, if there was something damaging to that employer's reputation by virtue of something you as an employee did, they have grounds. So that's what this case is. I mean, this wasn't going to get out anywhere. So how does that damage the employer's reputation or standing?
Yeah, and again, Aaron, I take my hat off to you. You're always walking that line of what the courts were asking themselves. So that same question you just posed it was asked by the court, and the court used this legal rule. They said, if it can infiltrate into the workplace, if it can somehow have an impact on our workplace environment and our culture, whatever you're doing, like if you're questioning what is grounds for dismissal, what is not, what does the employee have a right to and not to, if it can infiltrate into the work environment and the culture, if it has that risk, well, then more often than not, the employer has a right to investigate. So if you're doing something that can have an impact on the workplace environment, on how people feel at work, on their reputation, then you should be really conscious of the fact that this could spiral in a way that you don't want it to go, and it can have some lasting effects.
And to your point, everybody terminated here in this ruling, no severance, no nothing, see you later, too bad.
That's right.
Wow. So I guess the message here ultimately, Chris, is if you're going to be gossiping about someone at work, do it using, smoke signals or hand signs or something, so you can lie and say it had nothing to do with what you were actually gossiping about.
Well, and if you can, try gossiping to non-employees as well.
Jeez.
There's nothing that prevents you from going home and gossiping about everyone at work. But if you're going to do it with coworkers, about coworkers, that's where it starts to get sticky.
That's crazy. All right. Chris Dimakos, CJAD legal contributor. Chris, thank you so much.
Thanks, Aaron.
The newest tracks. Let's go. New music. And the next big thing.
Always on the new music first.
Your first place to hear it all.
'Cause you gon' like it, love it, wanna play it twice. Playing now.
iHeart New Music. Your digital station for brand new drops, fresh finds, and tomorrow's bangers.
I think we need something new.
Discover iHeart New Music. Always fresh, always first. Stream now on the free iHeartRadio app. The information and the interesting talk to follow. This is the Montreal Now podcast with Aaron Rand.
It is time to check in with Dr. Joe Schwarcz. He, of course, is host of the Dr. Joe Show, Sundays at 3 here on CJAD, and also director of the McGill Office for Science and Society. Joe, I looked at one of the headlines today, and I want to sort of start with this because I've never really seen you do this before. There's a show on TV called The Pit, highly acclaimed show on TV, Emmy Award winner, and you have some criticism of the way it portrays orthopedic surgeons. Am I reading this right?
Well, almost, yeah. I mean, it's a great show. I enjoy watching it, and just about everyone I know likes to watch it, including my daughter, who is an emergency room physician. So, it's fascinating. Anyway, there's one episode in which they portray an orthopedic surgeon, and there's been an accident, and someone's leg is totally severed, cut off, like above the knee, totally. They pack it in ice and then have the knee ready, and the orthopedic surgeon comes down to the emergency room and is very arrogant and doesn't show any compassion to the patient, just looks at it as sort of a mechanical thing that he now has to do to try to reattach the leg. And I mean, he is portrayed sort of as a callous person. Anyway, this online has precipitated a flurry of discussion, many comments by orthopedic surgeons who say that, you know, they are totally misrepresented by that they are very considerate of their patients, etc. So I just find it, you know, fascinating that a TV show will launch into this kind of discussion of bedside behavior by a physician.
Yeah, but it obviously worked. Took a look at the reaction it sparked.
Absolutely. And I find the show really remarkable. Even the special effects. I mean, you know, I don't have no idea how they do this. I mean, you know, they show surgery where it looks like they're really cutting into the person, and they show the stump of the leg that was just cut off. And anyway, what is interesting is my daughter and her emergency room colleagues like the show, and they say that in general all the medical procedures are properly portrayed. It's just that you would never see such a diversity of cases in one single day. I mean, because that's the tenet of the show. It follows hour by hour, just one day in the life of an emergency room. So, you know, of course, they see many different things in the emergency room, but never all that variety in one day. And also what doesn't happen is that when you go into the emergency room, all of a sudden you have 6 doctors around you trying to find out what is going on. But nevertheless, it's fascinating to watch because they portray realistic procedures, and I learn a lot from just watching that. I especially look for the pharmacology that's involved, and they must have some an army of consultants to get all that right.
Well, and as we said off the top, it works. It's a successful show. So there you go. Let me move on to something else, which is interesting as well. It's funny because I'm seeing more and more ads pop up online now for different kinds of chocolate, right? Including a Canadian one that says it has very little sugar in it. So a lot of people are wondering because the price of chocolate's gone kind of crazy over the past year,
absolutely.
Right? So
and a lot of that is due to climate change.
Okay, so that's going to get better, but not in a hurry. So you're asking what determines the quality? Yeah. I didn't know sort of the different qualities perhaps you want to look for.
Right. Well, of course, it all starts with the cacao tree. On which these pods grow, and when you split the pods open, you get the seeds inside, and that is where all chocolate comes from. Unfortunately, that tree is very susceptible to climate change, and it doesn't produce fruit well when the climate is warming. That's the reason that we are really seeing the increase in the price of chocolate, because the trees are not producing as well. So, anyway, this is the reason that it's really becoming expensive, and why manufacturers, of course, are looking for ways to cut cost. If you want really high-quality chocolate, the first ingredients on the label should be cacao powder or chocolate liqueur. Those are the terms that are used, because that is what you get when you take the seeds and dry them and ferment them and grind them up into a powder. That's cacao powder. That powder can then be squeezed by a machine to squeeze out what we call the cocoa butter. So the quality chocolate should have as the first ingredient cacao powder, to which the cacao butter has been added. So those should be the two first ingredients, and then followed by sugar. And indeed, if you have a really high quality chocolate, that's all you have in there. But the tendency these days is to replace the cocoa butter with vegetable fats, because those are much cheaper. Chemically, they are very similar, but not identical to cocoa butter. So when you taste a high-quality chocolate, you don't get the bitter taste. Even when there's a lot of cacao powder in it, you don't get the bitter taste that you get in the lower quality chocolates.
Wait, so are you saying the more bitter, the better?
No, it's not the same kind of bitterness. It's just a different kind of taste. Like, yes, all cacao powder to start with is bitter. That's why a Dutchman by the name of Van Houten came up with a breakthrough that was called the Dutching process, where they combined potassium carbonate to remove some of the acidity of the cocoa powder. And then in 1847, a long time ago, Joseph Fry took the next critical step when he found that when you mix cocoa powder with cocoa butter and sugar, then you mix it all together and you get the chocolate bar. But that's all you really need to get a high-quality chocolate bar. But as soon as you start seeing other vegetable fats in there, it's not going to taste the same. It's going to taste more waxy. Also, you often have other ingredients in there like lecithin, because that is needed so that the vegetable fat that is put in there mixes properly with the cocoa butter, but it does take away from the taste. And of course, what you can also do when you're using these vegetable fats is to replace more and more of the cocoa butter, with the much cheaper vegetable fat. So you'll see things like palm kernel oil very often in chocolate, and it won't taste the same.
So I'm going to ask you, Joe. So if you're buying chocolate, which I guess you do, what brand do you buy?
I buy Lindt.
Okay.
I find that very tasty, and I like the 70% cacao because there actually, believe it or not, is potential health benefit in there because the cocoa powder contains a lot of these chemicals, naturally occurring chemicals we call polyphenols. And those have a history of being very good in terms of controlling blood pressure, serving as antioxidants, etc. Okay. Now, I'm not going to say that chocolate is really medicine, but if you're going to have some sort of a dessert after your meal, I think a few small squares of dark chocolate is certainly better than having some cake or other.
And for someone listening, by the way, let's just take that and say instead of a few squares, a few bars would be perfectly okay. Dr. Joe Schwarcz. Joe, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Aaron.
Staying up to date on your schedule. This is the Montreal Now podcast with Aaron Rand.
It is time for us to check in with Carmi Levy, our CTV tech analyst, talk about a couple of stories in the news. And of course, if we're going to talk tech, we're going to talk Artemis 2 right off the top. Everything going, Carmi, basically according to plan. It has been so far, right? I think fair to say, a picture perfect mission.
Yeah, I mean, a few glitches here and there. The toilet broke as soon as they got into orbit, and they managed to fix that, and they've sort of been monitoring it closely since then because it's still not 100%. They've had some issues with Outlook. Their email wasn't working properly, and they had to
I have those issues, and I'm not in space.
That's exactly it. Everyone I've been talking to, they're like, yeah, well, we use Outlook too, and we hate it as well. So, it's nice to know the astronauts their experience is consistent with ours. But, in terms of the vehicle itself and, its overall performance, it has been a remarkably smooth mission. Especially considering just what they've done. They went over 400,000 kilometers away from Earth. They set a record for the distance humans have ever been from Earth. They went behind the moon. They saw a lunar eclipse, actually a solar eclipse behind the moon. Got some unbelievably spectacular pictures, but also did some remarkable science along the way. And now they're on their way back. I mean, this is as historic and dreamlike a space mission as you can imagine.
Yeah, and again, you want to be careful when you say this. They're not back yet, right? And that's obviously the re-entry is a big part of the mission as well. So we wish them good luck. That's supposed to happen tomorrow. And then after that, I guess, the next one is supposed to get up there and maybe reestablish. I think that's the plan here, right? Reestablish a man on the moon and possibly a whole lot more than that, including maybe building. What do they call it when they're going to put an installation on the moon?
Yeah, a moon base, and that is the plan. And Jared Isaacman, who's the new NASA administrator, has made it clear, unlike Apollo, where they basically went just to land and then came home after a few days, the goal here is to get there and stay. And do what they've done with the ISS, just keep rotating astronauts on and off so there's a constant presence there. In order to get there, the next mission will be known as Artemis 3, and they're going to be testing the HLS, the Human Landing System module. So basically like the equivalent of the Lunar Excursion module from Apollo. They're going to test them in low Earth orbit just to make sure they work and make sure that all the docking stuff works too. And then the plan is for Artemis 4, the mission after that, to actually take one of those landers and go to the moon and land on the moon, much like Apollo 11. So still a ways to go yet, but the plan is for Artemis 3 to fly sometime in 2027, and they want to land on the moon by 2030. So things are going to happen pretty quickly, all thanks to what we've learned on this mission.
Pretty impressive, in fact. All right, let me move on, talk about this story. That, you know, when I see anything and it says traffic, tackling traffic woes, I'm all ears, because in this city, that's something we've gone on about for a long, long time now. This is I was going to say, unfortunately, I hope this is going to make things better. This is Toronto making a decision now to give AI a green light as far as traffic goes. Explain what this will do or what it's supposed to do.
So for about $50,000 to $60,000 per intersection, basically what they do is they wire it up. They add a bunch of sensors and cameras and computers to that intersection. It's all powered by artificial intelligence. It scans traffic in real time, and based on what's happening, it adjusts the changing of the lights to maximize traffic flow through that intersection. So imagine having a really smart traffic cop at 135 intersections scattered throughout the city. But it's technology that's doing this. And so it can accommodate changing weather. It can accommodate school pickup and drop off times, or maybe there's an accident somewhere. And so they work together to kind of move traffic around and minimize disruption. It's one of those cases of, you know, AI being used for good. And as it turns out, this is technology that was developed here in Canada, and has been tested in pilot programs. There was a Kirkland, Quebec, has used AI in a limited scope on St. Charles,
right?
And the results of that were very positive. And so now, basically, it's scaling it up in Canada's arguably biggest city, and certainly not the most interesting one, but certainly the biggest, and learning from that experience, which they will then share with other cities that are interested in doing the same thing.
Did you just call Toronto not the most interesting city?
Definitely not. And I say that as a native Montrealer. They may have the latest and greatest traffic technology, but, if you want to party, you're certainly not going there.
All right. Well, let me come back to something you said when you talked about the cost, because when you say it's going to cost, $30,000 to $40,000 per intersection, right? Which might seem like a lot of money. But then I thought, if you're going to assign a police officer to an intersection on a regular basis, that's double time or overtime or whatever it happens to be. This doesn't seem like it's that crazy as far as cost goes. And it's going to be probably a better system than having, a real human being. And I say that because I have been to many intersections where police have been assigned to control lights. I don't really think they do I want to be nice, the best job possible, because it's a matter of almost forgetting sometimes when traffic is moving. Hey, by the way, there's another direction going and there's 3 blocks backed up traffic that way. So I imagine this will do a whole lot better.
It absolutely will, and it is a relatively cheap investment for a huge payoff. And of course, that payoff is indefinite. You don't have to keep paying for it. And so, at the same time, a traffic cop on the corner of one intersection isn't communicating in real time with other traffic cops at all the adjacent intersections. Whereas these AI technologies are doing exactly that. And so they're looking not only at this intersection but the big picture and saying, what does that look like? How do we maximize it? How do we learn over time to get even better at adjusting the lights? And so we often talk about synchronizing lights, but the problem with syncing them it's a one-time thing, and over time they become less synced. And that old technology in 2026, that doesn't fly. Thanks to AI, they're literally being synced on the fly. They're talking to each other. They're looking at both the macro picture and the big picture, and it is as good. It's easily the best high-tech traffic cop you can imagine, and it frees cops to do work that's probably more value added that cannot be taken over by technology. So we're not talking about replacing cops. We're talking about complementing them.
Is this a pilot project, or is this, if this does work, they're going to roll it out to more intersections? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, they're calling this a pilot project, but they are saying that it's 135 intersections to start with, mostly across North York, Scarborough, and Etobicoke, and so that's a pretty big pilot. And the plan is that they'll do it for about 6 to 12 months, and then next year in 2027 and 2028 they will expand it across even more roads. So this isn't going to stop with this. The numbers are only going to grow from there, and I would expect at some point AI technology will simply be like when you build an intersection, you just incorporate it in. It won't even be a question. That'll just be the way things work. And I think that's a good thing. Again, it's the smartest way to spend what limited budget you have on traffic control, because the payoff is beyond what you would spend to begin with.
Let's hope Montreal is listening. All right, let me move on to this story here. Again, something to be concerned about with AI now being used to add fake details. This is actually kind of dangerous in immigration, asylum applications. This is according to federal officials. You know what? I'm almost not surprised. I'm surprised it took this long to notice that was being done.
Yeah, exactly. So Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada and the Immigration and Refugee Board, they said they were noticing that the applications for asylum that refugees were submitting, they were getting longer, and they were including kind of more details in them, but the arguments weren't necessarily better than they were. And so they ran them through AI verification software to see, did they use AI to generate these? And they're finding that in increasing numbers, that is exactly what's happening. Applicants are using AI to build detailed dossiers, detailed applications, including stories of hardship, stories of where they come from. And in many cases, they're citing events that did not happen, because we know AI can make stuff up. Lawyers in many cases have often, in the past couple of years, have submitted cases to judges, briefs that included citations of cases that did not occur. And the same thing is happening here. So they are saying that they are going to be using AI to detect this incoming content and then flag them, because, of course, if you lie on your application, you can't reapply for another 5 years. It's a major problem. Even before AI came along, there were they called them ghost consultants, and they would work with immigration applicants to create a package that would maximize the potential to get in. And in some cases, they would make things up. Well, now you don't need a ghost consultant. You just use AI to build it for you. But the government is saying, we're watching for it. We will ban you if we find that you're using AI for this. And so it's AI versus AI, and the government is saying, we're not going to lose this one.
All right. Well, we leave it at that. Carmi, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Great being with you, Aaron. Thank you.
Canadian women are looking for more out of themselves, their businesses, their elected leaders, and the world around them.
And that's why we're thrilled to introduce the Honest Talk podcast.
I'm Jennifer Stewart.
And I'm Catherine Clark. And in this podcast, we interview Canada's most inspiring women.
Entrepreneurs, artists, athletes, politicians, and newsmakers, all at different stages of their journey.
So if you're looking to connect, then we hope you'll join us.
Listen to the Honest Talk podcast on iHeartRadio or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
It's the sounds of your city. The Montreal Now podcast with Aaron Rand.
Oh, voilà Suzuki. Caulfield s'avance. Le tir! Ma parole, c'est fait! De Maurice à Boum Boum, à Guy, à Steve, à Pierre, à Stéphane, à Cole. Le flambeau est passé. 50 buts!
This went on and on and on. I mean, for a while. If you were there last night, boy, what a time to be a fan at the Bell Center. That call, there you go. They're starting the chant again, right? Absolutely crazy. The call you heard is, of course, from Pierre Houde, has been calling Canadiens games since Fred Flintstone played for the Habs. And he is on the line right now. Pierre, how you doing?
Hello, Aaron. I'm doing great. I think it was more Fred Flintstone playing bowling with Barney.
Yeah. Well, if they had had hockey, he would have played. I mean, and that's okay. We know they did bowl. Listen, yeah. For you last night, obviously having been through this for so many years, and I think pretty much everybody you call, perhaps with the exception of, the Rocket, you've been there for those 50 goals, I think, right? How many?
I'm not there as such for Guy and Steve. I was a fan by then because they actually scored all their goals, mostly, I mean, not mostly, but exclusively in the dynasty decade in the 70s. So I was a teenager, or then again, I was also starting on radio as a DJ. But Pierre Larouche the same, but Stéphane Richer, of course, I was starting to get involved. I've called a few of Stéphane's goals, of course, but the 50th as such was a first in my career. It was I'm still vibrating from that extraordinary moment last night.
I'm sorry for making you older than you actually are by saying you were around for so many of those. Listen, so obviously, you were prepared. We have been for a while, right? Because it's been, I think, 3 games since he scored his 49th. Everybody's kind of been holding their breath.
Yeah.
How long did you work on that call?
Well, that's a good question. First of all, you want to work on it, but not too much, Aaron, because it's still live. It's still a reporting live, something that you are witnessing, right? So you don't even know if it's going to happen. But then, if it's happening, you want to make sure that you live up to the magnitude or the historical perspective of the event you're about to call. So how do you recap this magic history of of one of the most recognized franchises in the world of sports in a couple of seconds? Because basically you want to shut up as quick as possible and let the folks at home or in sports bar or on their phone, you want them to live the moment as such. So I thought it was a good idea to make the chain and to say here's finally the final link, the final piece of the chain. Cole Caulfield, the torch has been passed, 50 goals. So I kind of planned this little extra. But what the other thing you wish for that you don't have any control on is that it's going to be a clear-cut goal. It could have been a fluke. It could have been, it could have been a deflection. It could have been something coming out of nowhere. This one was like textbook. I would write it myself that way. From the defensive zone, from Lane Hudson, then the 3 folks on the same line, they get their names on the score sheet, and Cole finishes it up. It was like just the perfect way to build up this call and then deliver what the little piece I had prepared.
And, of course, it was beautiful to see as well last night. His dad was there. They kept showing pictures of his dad. I think at one point he actually, he kind of teared up a little bit. Which was amazing, right? I mean, you have to realize at some point these are kids who parents drove them to hockey and took them to practice and all that kind of stuff. And here they are playing on the biggest stage of the world in their sport. And he is now in the record books as a Montreal Canadien. So really special minute.
You're so right about that. And coincidence has it that I happened to be in a restaurant with Lynn a couple of months ago, and Cole was there with his dad. So they came and they said hi, and we did the chat for about 20, 30 minutes. His father is just amazing. He's such a very nice, humble man, so proud of his son. And last night when I came down from the booth trying to join my colleagues in the production truck, I bumped into Paul, Cole's father. And he was still red-eyed, and it was so touching. He said, "My God, Pierre, I'm so happy that it was you calling my son's goal." And I said, "I'm so happy that life gave me that amazing privilege." He's a very nice father, and he said, Mom is at home and she's recording the whole thing, and he says, "I don't understand one word you're saying, but it sounds pretty good to us."
Isn't that great? Wow!
I'm just adding this on, Aaron, because it just shows that they're very good people. Cole is a very, very good young man, and it happens to good people, those things. And it was just a little sidebar that was very touching for me.
All right, Pierre, thank you so much. Again, I always appreciate when you give us some time. And again, congratulations last night. It's a moment I'm sure Canadiens fans will never, ever forget. So, merci.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great weekend. Hope to see you soon.
You bet. You too. Pierre Houde has been calling. I've made him call Canadiens games apparently for the last 70 years, but you know what I'm saying. He's been calling. He's the French voice of Montreal Canadiens hockey for many, many years, and just an amazing call last night, reminding you of all the former Canadiens like, the Rocket and Bernie Geoffrion or Boom Boom, Stéphane Richer. I'd forgotten yesterday, when they flashed these things on screen, I'd forgotten that Pierre Larouche had a 50-goal season with the Habs. And we forget, Steve Shutt, who used to live here actually for a while, he had 60 goals one season. So, back in the heyday of, as they say, of the Montreal Canadiens. So nice to have Cole Caulfield join that club. Could not be happier for him.
Listen live to Montreal Now with Aaron Rand. Weekdays from 2 until 6. Miss something? Find on-demand highlights at CJAD800.com or on the free iHeartRadio app. The newest tracks. Let's go. New music. And the next big thing.
Always on the new music first.
Your first place to hear it all.
'Cause you gon' like it, love it, wanna play it twice. Playing now.
iHeart New Music. Your digital station for brand new drops, fresh finds, and tomorrow's bangers.
I think we need something new.
Discover iHeart New Music. Always fresh, always first. Stream now on the free iHeartRadio app.